Dembele.
Ousmane Dembélé. Ousmane Dembélé.
He's already quite unprofessional. We all know that Dembele doesn't really seem to like training that much. Many times he's arrived late to sessions. Sometimes he even gets the sessions between morning and evening mixed up. You imagine him for many months now, for the rest of the season, if he didn't really feel like he had to be there, if he didn't really feel as though, oh, well, what's the point in turning up the training? I'm not playing anyway. You think of the kind of condition he's going to get himself in before he goes to his new club in the summer. It would be no good for him whatsoever.
Well, look, they've just basically said to Ousmane Dembele, we spent 135 million euros signing you in 2017. You've only played for us something like 87 times because of injuries and loss of form, and we think you want to leave on a free transfer in the summer, and we're not going to let that happen. We've offered you a new contract. The new contract, it has to be said, involves him taking a pay cut. He's refused to sign that contract.
Right now, it is in everyone's best interest that Dembele leaves in January.
This was Dembele's past, it was his present, and it was very widely known and felt like it was going to be his future as well. After becoming one of the biggest and best prospects in world football at Borussia Dortmund in Germany, he made his move, or his big money move, to Barcelona for over £130 million, becoming one of the most expensive signings in European history. Of course, that came with a lot of expectation and promise for Dembele's side. However, that move, of course, did not materialize how everyone was expecting. A move that was filled with injuries and problems, personal issues on both sides. Of course, that move did not reach the expectations that everyone thought it would have reached. However, the last couple of seasons, or last 2 seasons, when he made his move to PSG, it shows what happens when you give your players responsibility and confidence in their own abilities. Now, I'm not saying, of course, that this did not happen in Barcelona, but of course, they were in 2 very different situations. Now, when Dembele arrived in Barcelona, of course, he had superstars around him. From Lionel Messi to, in the window where he was signed for £130 million, another player was signed for another £130+ million, which was Philippe Coutinho from Liverpool. That, of course, along with the number of players, star players that were signed along the way. Now, of course, any good player or any player of his magnitude in regards to talent should be able to deal with this type of pressure. However, not every player deals with these type of situations in the same manner. Of course, he did not deal with it in the best of ways, which has, of course, meant that his time at Barcelona, 90% of the time, was disappointing. However, what Luis Enrique has done at PSG with Ousmane Dembélé is simply given him that type of responsibility that he wants and he needs, which is giving him a young team around him and say that this is his team and this is his responsibility to lead that team to the highest honors in European football. And that's exactly what he achieved with PSG, of course, winning the treble, beginning with the league, winning by a landslide, and of course beating Reims 3-0 in the Coupe de France, and in one of the most one-sided games I've ever watched in the Champions League final, beating Inter Milan 5-0. And you can, of course, we've seen the amount of people talking about the way he was pressing against Inter Milan, but that shows how he was locked in that final and how he really took that responsibility on his shoulders and led that team from the front, doing exactly what Luis Enrique was demanding from Kylian Mbappe to do, of course, when he was at PSG. However, Dembele showed that he is one of the, of course, leaders in that team, if not the biggest leader in that side. And he initiated everything good that PSG had done in that game. He stretched that side, that Inter Milan back 5, when they were, or PSG was on the ball, and off the ball, of course, his pressing. The amount of turnovers that PSG had in their favour from Dembele's pressing alone was just absolutely fantastic, and it shows, as we've mentioned a couple of minutes ago, how just giving a player some responsibility, how that can come such a long way for a player that for the best part of his career has just been filled with so much negativity, disappointment, and injuries, of course. So of course he needed that final, he needed that performance, and honestly, even if they had not won that game in the Champions League final, my opinion would have not really changed, because he's shown that shift in mentality since the beginning of the season. And of course he's had his problems even with Enrique during his time at PSG, but that's totally normal, and that of course happens. But the overall picture is how you can give a player confidence and how that player could really shift how a team could operate. And PSG with Enrique are the best example of what you can do with just giving your players the responsibility to perform on the pitch. And honestly, I think Mbappe's situation is really intriguing because, of course, he's a fantastic player and one of the best in the world. And I think he scored over 30 goals this season in his debut season for Real Madrid, which I think was not even done by Cristiano Ronaldo. However, it just emphasizes how important the team game really is. When we're talking about how PSG press and how they work in unison to win the ball back as a team, Real Madrid and Kylian Mbappe is the complete opposite of that. Now, I'm not singling out Mbappe. However, having him and Vinicius in the same team has made so many issues for Carlo Ancelotti. And I don't think it's been a coincidence that since Mbappe has arrived at Madrid, they've had a lot of issues, and they have, of course, they did not win the Champions League or League, so they've gone trophyless this season. So I think it's really important to understand that you need to have balance in your team. Now, having one of Kylian Mbappe or Vinicius could be enough for a team to work out of possession without having that much of a problem. Think about Mo Salah with Liverpool or Erling Haaland with Man City, for example. You can carry one player that doesn't work that well defensively in your team at the very most. But when you're carrying or trying to carry two or even three players like Real Madrid with Vinicius, Mbappe, or even like a Jude Bellingham, you can't have too many superstars in your team. And I think that is one of the key reasons why Real Madrid has been struggling this season. Teams that are semi-decent on the ball can play right through them with such ease. And if you're not strong up front when you don't have the ball, you just leave these type of teams to play right through you without much of an issue. And it's just, I think it's an intriguing story for Mbappe. Of course, the story is that he's left in PSG for Real Madrid to win major honors, and in his first season when he's left PSG's won everything that could be won in European football. And it's just maybe not an issue of that one player, if you don't want to single out Kylian Mbappe, but at the end, you can't have too many superstars or too many players don't want to do those defensive duties in your team. Moving on to some clips now that I picked up from the final, and I just enjoyed his pressing so much that I just had to make a section just about his pressing, because it's just been a dying art. Now, of course, we see now 95% of the teams are so-called pressing from the front, but it's just Dembele, the way that Dembele pressed Inter Milan's centre backs and goalkeeper is exactly how any team should be teaching how they should lead from the front, because that's the only way you can actually force turnovers. So let's begin with the first clip, where this is the first set piece for Inter Milan, and you see how he's positioned now. It looks really, really weird, of course. However, it's exactly what you need to do. Dembele here understands what Bastoni wants to do. Of course, it's to switch the play to either his centre-back partner, which is Acerbi, who's coming inside here, or of course play back into Sommer. Now we see most strikers do one of the two things, which is either close off this passing lane of Acerbi, and that leaves the passing lane open to Sommer, or the other way around, which is closing off, of course, this passing lane into the goalkeeper, which opens up Acerbi. What Dembele does, and his little movements that you see, the little footwork that he performs in between, going in between those two players, leads to the long ball in the end. Now, of course, these are such little minor details that just makes the world of difference. Because if he does close off one certain passing angle, that will lead to the free man playing or receiving the ball. But what he does is just so important, which is just being patient and understanding that you don't have to commit to one side of the pitch, which is just really important. And of course it leads to the long ball. Now, moving on to the second clip, a certain aspect of pressing that is really missed, which is curved pressing. What is curved pressing? You see here, ball, it was a short ball going in from, I think this is Pavard, and again he curves his run to close off this passing lane here, which is into Pavard or Acerbi, which forces the long ball too. If he basically goes into the path of Sommer, in front of Sommer, this will leave 2 to 3 options for the goalkeeper. Now, of course, all goalkeepers, or most goalkeepers now play with their feet, and they're really skilled in doing so. So the 3 options that he leaves if he presses him from the front is he either gets skilled, of course, going from one side to the other, I'm talking about Sommer, of course, or playing into Pavard's path, who is quite open, or play into Bastoni's path. But what he does, the curved press that I'm talking about, is exactly how you should be pressing, because you're closing off what he does here. This little movement from going from he's right in front of him to curving his run is closing off this player, and it's closing off this player. Of course, and then of course Dewey helps with pressing Bastoni, which leaves Sommer playing into DeMarco. Going on to the third clip, I can go on and on, of course, but again, it's curving his run, closing off one side of the pitch, so Sommer can play into only one side. He has an option of playing only into one side of the pitch, which is just so valuable. One more thing that I just has to be emphasized. Now, I think Ralph Rangnick was the one that said it. I could be wrong, but it's not Ralph Rangnick. It was someone else. But it was about the last meter when pressing. Now, what does that mean? It means, what do you do as a striker when you're in this position? Now, you've got one of the two options. You either just stick to, okay, you've closed off this side of the pitch, so I'm just gonna jog on to the goalkeeper and you've done your job. Or you can do what Dembele does, and that's the correct thing, which is go for that last second where you can actually try and win the ball. Now, this is actually the most important part of his pressing, and which is what led to most of Sommer's long balls being inaccurate, is he makes the goalkeeper, which is Sommer, he makes Sommer feel like he's actually going to win the ball, going for that last meter in his pressing, which leads to Sommer hurrying up his long passes even more. So I think Ahmad from Manchester United actually does the same thing too, and he does not do it with the goalkeeper. He does it with centre backs too, and you can see a lot of the goals that he scored or chances he created. I'm talking about Ahmad. The first action was him winning the ball from being intense and trying to actually win the ball, not pressing. And when reaching the player that he's pressing, just starts jogging. So that is the most important part when pressing, and that's exactly what led to Sommer hurrying up even more and then losing the ball in the end. The ball in the end is not accurate enough. So I don't want to make this section too long, but I just want to emphasize any team, any academy in the world that wants to really go from the essence of pressing and how pressing should be done, just set up some clips of how Dembele pressed against Inter Milan. It was just beautiful to see this type of pressing and someone really putting an emphasis on how to lead from the front. So I think that was something that I enjoyed very much, and a lot of teams could learn from how PSG and Dembele led from the front. Now you realize how good these players are when you understand that they have to find a balance between how intense they are out of possession and when they switch to their team having the ball, how good and intelligent and composed they have to be in the correct areas, and when they do have the ball at their feet to perform at the highest level. And that's what Dembele did in the game against Inter Milan, where he was positioning himself in and around or between the defensive to midfield line of Inter Milan. He was always in areas where he cannot be marked, if it's around the midfield or if it's in areas where he drops in between the lines where defensive players are not able to track him because he's way too ahead of the defenders. So in this clip here, it shows that you see the midfield three here of Barella, Calhanoglu and Mkhitaryan, and you can see where he's positioned right here. He's in an area where the centre back of Inter Milan cannot track him, because you see the right centre back here is already tracking an extra player, so they can't commit. Or the midfield line is already attracted to the ball, so he's in a great position to receive the ball. And he was doing this all game, where he was just switching the ball from left to right or right to left, depending on the situation. Now this is just one clip. Going into the second clip right here. Now you can see how you can actually create from these type of positions. He receives here first in the same exact position, where Bastonia actually follows him this time, but you see the drawbacks of when that centre back follows the Dembele. He plays right into Hakimi into Fabian Ruiz, and Bastoni's out of position here, and you're left with this area here behind DiMarco and Acerbi, who's once again committing when Dembele receives the ball. He plays right behind Hakimi, and DiMarco follows him well, but it shows what happens when that centre back follows Dembele. It leaves gaps in behind, and it just provided so many issues for Inter Milan. Another clip that's really important is this one, where you see where he's positioned. He's an incredibly intelligent player. Most players in this position stays in this space right here. It's called the half space in between the wide and the central channels or central spaces. And what he does is he knows that Dumfries wants to jump on the left back, which is Nuno Mendes, and the centre backs are not close to him enough. And what he does is he takes 2, 3, 4 steps back, where he's in between those two players, and if the ball is played well from Marquinhos, he was going to receive the ball in a very promising situation. But overall, it just shows how intelligent he really is when his team has the ball. And of course, these are all instructions from the manager Luis Enrique, but it takes a really composed and understanding player to actually be able to put that on the pitch put those instructions on the pitch and perform at that type of level. And just to end this whole video, I just want to end it with this clip right here, and it shows his mentality. I think this is at 3-0 if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. A switcher play is played from Nuno Mendes, and Hakimi is not able to win the ball because it's overplayed from Nuno Mendes. But who arrives at the end of that ball? It's Dembele sprinting towards the ball to try and win it. And honestly, this is not just a Dembele thing. It was in the 75th minute when they were 4-0 up. You see Kvara tracking back Dumfries from his own half to win the ball in an incredible 50-50 against Dumfries. And of course, it's just an overall mentality shift from PSG, and I don't want to say it's all down to Luis Enrique. Players have to be committed too, but for Dembele's sake, I think he reached a whole new level of proving how good he really is and proving how good of a teammate he could be. And once again, emphasizing when you take that responsibility or given that responsibility from your club and from your manager, you can see that type of performance from a number of players, because there is a lot of talent in world football. But this is the end of the video. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and hopefully I'll be trying to make this type of content more, not even long, lots of long form. But yeah, hope you guys have enjoyed, and see you guys in the next video.